Hi there, my name is Ethan Baird. I'm a radio programs manager and producer. I also work with podcasters to make their audio sound professional and polished. Today I want to talk about the 3 most easy to fix mistakes that I see new podcasters make that immediately make their listeners tune out. This video is meant for people who may not be very experienced with audio production, so a lot of concepts are aimed at beginners. I'm using Adobe Audition here, but all the concepts apply to every other production software out there. If you want me to make a video explaining how to do this in other programs, just let me know in the comments. The final disclaimer that I'd like to make is that I'm not going to be playing a lot of actual audio to you in this video. I think it's more important to cover the core concepts, and I'll be going more in depth in further videos. So let's get started. Your listener does not want to have to keep turning the volume up and down in order to hear your podcast, and sometimes you can even cause hearing damage when the majority of your podcast is soft and then all of a sudden the volume jumps up drastically. If you look at this example, the intro and outro are significantly louder than the content, which meant I had to bump up the volume after the intro, and then I got a massive fright when the outro kicked in. So how do we solve this? Depending on the audio, there are a lot of approaches that need to be implemented, but luckily these are usually pretty easy. In my opinion, it's incredibly important to have the volume of your intro, outro, and other branding elements be similar to the volume of the rest of your podcast. To do this, when you're overlaying any music and sound effects, you should really pay close attention to the VU meter at the bottom. Dry audio, or audio without music and sound effects underneath, should not be significantly louder than wet audio, i.e. audio with music or sound effects. So you've got to very carefully adjust the volume of your music and vocals, so that when your introduction ends, your listener doesn't have to adjust their volume. Now, it's always going to be difficult to get the volume mix exactly the same, and there's definitely some leeway in that your intro can be an amount louder than the rest of your audio, but try to keep it to a minimum. In this example, you can see that the interviewer and interviewee have completely different volumes. Now, this is pretty easy to solve. All you'd have to do is just go through the file, highlight the sections that you want to raise, and turn them up using the volume adjuster at the top. However, this is a pretty tedious process, and ideally you would have recorded the vocals in such a way that you wouldn't have to do this at the end, namely by adjusting the microphone input gain for each vocal track. Many podcast recordings, especially in the case of interviews, can get quite raucous. This means that one or more people end up laughing, and your vocal track ends up with a wide volume range, like in the example you see here. You could go through the track and edit this individually like the previous example, but again, this is very tedious and can make your audio sound quite unnatural. Luckily, we can fix this with an effect known as compression. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of how this works in this video, but all you need to know is that it kind of squeezes your audio so that the volume becomes a lot more even throughout. So, what you've got to do is click on Effects, scroll down to Amplitude and Compression, find Dynamics Processing, and then you can browse through a list of presets. My personal favorites are Smooth Vocal and Compander, but you can browse through the rest and see which one works for your audio. In a future video, we'll go through how to make your own compression presets, but Adobe Audition's presets should work wonderfully. Most podcasters don't have access to soundproofed studios, which means that inevitably you'll get some amount of background noise in your audio. Now, I'm not talking about random sounds that were accidentally recorded. You would ideally re-record those segments to get rid of that, although there are some ways around that too. What I'm talking about is this: the background hiss that your microphone picks up, usually from the sound of your computer fan. Depending on your audio, this might not really be noticeable, so you may think just to ignore it, but it becomes a serious problem at high volumes or if you want to use any other effects like compression. I would always recommend minimizing this noise in order to give your podcast a more polished professional sound. So, what you have to do is find a portion of your audio that just contains that background noise. What I like to do is highlight what I think is a suitable portion of audio, then boost the volume a bit. You can then hear if there are any random interfering noises in the background, like maybe someone coughing, a door closing, rustling of papers, that kind of thing. Once you found the background noise, reduce it back to the original volume by using the undo function. Then right-click and select Capture Noise Print. This puts that little piece of audio into the system's memory. Then select the entire file, go to Effects, Noise Reduction/Restoration, and then Noise Reduction Process. Now what you can see is a spectral display of your noise. This next part is going to require a little trial and error, because sometimes if you reduce your background noise too heavily, it affects the original audio, making it sound washed out. Don't worry about the technicalities for now. All you need to know is, the higher you put your noise reduction, the more it reduces it, but the worse your audio might sound. So you've got to play around and see which one works for you. You can use the little play icon in the bottom left to preview what this would sound like. You can then also adjust the reduce by number. The higher this is, the more the noise will be reduced. In this example, my noise is faint enough that I can put both sliders all the way up and it still sounds great. Now, you need to bear in mind, it's pretty much impossible to reduce the noise entirely, and you're going to drive yourself crazy if you want to get this exactly perfect. The most important thing is just trying to get the best possible audio quality. But, however, if your background noise is incredibly harsh, you might need to reconsider how you record your podcast in the first place. Audio clips are generally in stereo, which means that the left and right speaker or earphone each gets their own audio signal. This is called panning. It is really useful for creating a sense of depth for certain effects. You may, for example, want to have a clip pan from left to right to express a sense of movement. However, panning can also create ear strain if one side is louder than the other for the majority of the podcast. I would recommend keeping basically everything in your podcast unpanned, except in cases where you are using it for effect. This is especially important if you use a directional mic, like the popular Zoom recorder series. There are two ways to fix this depending on the kind of result that you want. If you have a clip where one side of the audio, like in this example, the left side, has better audio quality, you might want to keep only that audio and discard the rest. Disable the side that you don't want to use by clicking on the L or R respectively. Then, highlight the audio from the side you want to use and copy it. Switch over to the other side, delete it, and then paste your audio. Sometimes, however, you may want to combine both sides together. You do this by going to Edit, Convert Sample Type, changing the sample rate to Same as Source, changing the bit depth to Same as Source, then changing the channels to Mono. This combines both sides into one clip. You can then convert this back to stereo by going back to Convert Sample Type and changing the channel to stereo. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or want me to make a video on a specific topic, just let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more podcasting tutorials, and you can check out ethanbaird.co.za/blog for some articles tackling podcast content and delivery.